Good afternoon. We're going to allow 3 to 5 minutes for some guests to trickle in. So thanks for your patience, and we'll get started momentarily. Okay, 1 more minute, we'll get started. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Okay, well, why don't we get started? So good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Simplifying Management of HIPAA Compliance webinar. I am Tony Lanzafame, a Security and Compliance Solution Specialist in state and local government at Microsoft. We'll start off with our typical dad joke. So, hey, Richard, did you hear that I have a fear of speed bumps?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, but I'm slowly getting over it.
I like that.
Yeah. So that's good. So I'm going to pitch things over to Steve in just a second, but just to kind of open things up, HIPAA is very complex. Compliance is challenging. Microsoft has solutions that will help our government customers reduce the complexity of making progress towards meeting their HIPAA compliance. Please submit your questions in the QA window. We'll try to take them throughout the course of the call. And with that being said, I'll hand it over to Steve.
Thank you, Tony. Yeah, we got quite a packed agenda today. We're going to first just quickly review the HIPAA HITECH HITRUST overview. That will not take too long because we want to dive right into some of the really good parts. Starting off with Rich talking about the HIPAA premium assessment templates and some other goodies within the Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager. And then after Rich, Ashok is going to come over from the Defender side and talk about the regulatory compliance dashboard in Defender for Cloud, which can also assist you as well. And then we have another special guest today. We have Raul from one of our trusted partners, Agile, who's also going to talk about putting all of this together in motion and how to successfully execute. So once again, my name is Steve Thomas. I'm a senior technical specialist here at Microsoft, and our primary focus today is to talk about HIPAA compliance in your digital data estate. Now, just to recap, the HIPAA stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. It was an act of Congress that was signed into law way back in 1996, and you might also hear it referred to from time to time as the Kassebaum-Kennedy Act or the Kennedy-Kassebaum Act. You may also see it often misspelled as HIPAA with two P's, as I want to do. So I have to be very careful when I'm proofreading as well. But at the end of the day, the HIPAA and the HITECH Act, which we'll also talk about, are laws that affect not only just healthcare entities, but any type of agency or private entity that's going to be interfacing with these entities involving access to what we call PHI, or protected health information. Now, alongside of HIPAA is HITECH, which is the Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health Act. This was part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009. This set more modernization of standards and regulations on the meaningful use of electronic health records and their adoption in the healthcare system as a critical national goal. And it also incentivized the EHR adoption. And probably the most crucial one that applies to us as agencies who work with digital data and the crossing of PHI, Subtitle D is the most crucial, that involves improved privacy provisions and security. Now, I also want to reiterate that when Rich talks a little bit later about the compliance manager, we have simplified this for you in that when we refer to HIPAA assessments, we are combining both HIPAA and HITECH because the majority of the necessary controls and actions that will need to be put in place overlap between HIPAA and HITECH. And of course, at the end of the day, we're all about keeping our agencies not compliant for good, but also because of the potential risk of civil and criminal penalties. There are civil penalties for even the most innocent of violations. Penalties go all the way from $100 to $50,000 per violation. And then, of course, we have criminal penalties as well, fines up to $250,000, imprisonment up to 10 years, depending on the type of offense or violation. Now, HITRUST is a common security framework. It's a prescriptive set of controls that meet the requirements of multiple regulations and standards. And this is a great framework that provides a way to comply with HIPAA. And also to point out, Microsoft Purview Compliance Manager, in addition to HIPAA, also has a premium assessment template for HITRUST as well. Now, with that being said, now that we've gone into the quick overview and review of the acronyms at play here, HIPAA, HITECH, HITRUST, we're going to get right down to the fun stuff and actually show this stuff in action. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to another senior technical specialist here at Microsoft, Rich Beserra, to show you the compliance manager.
Hey, appreciate it, Steve. You want to leave this up on your screen, or do you want me to take over for the PowerPoint and the demo?
You can go ahead and take over.
All right, give me 1 second. I'll go ahead and grab the screen for a minute. All right, so this is a very short little PowerPoint that I'm going to go through, and then we're going to get to seeing how this works in practice. But if you've never explored the Compliance Manager before, this is a great way to take the long, dense requirements that HIPAA and HITECH contain and turn them into an actual project that a team or even just one or two people can start accomplishing. You can break it down into manageable chunks and you can start meeting your compliance requirements bit by bit. So it becomes a much more organized project and you don't have to worry as much about missing things. Now, that's not the only thing Compliance Manager can do, but we are going to focus on that for today since that and HIPAA is our meeting for today. So if you're interested in using the Compliance Manager, and we'll look at the template for this in just a minute, you can use these without needing to go and spend money on them. You have access to trials that'll give you 25 premium assessments, and you can pick from the list of them, whatever you want to use, and you can use them for 90 days, all of it without needing to tell your organization to budget for something or to wait for approval from finance or anything like that. You can get those, you can set them up, and you can have them start looking at your environment to see what you're using today. You don't need to wait. And with that, I am going to switch over to our demo. I'm going to show you what this actually looks like here. So here is the Compliance Manager in our demo. Now you can offer somebody access to this in terms of permissions. So if you don't need your whole compliance or your whole admin team to look at this, you can use our role-based access controls right here under permissions to say, hey, this person should only be able to look at some of these assessments, but not actually sign up for one. Or this person can come in here and edit notes, but they can't do anything else. You can get very granular with the permissions and how you want people to access this. And before you even get to a premium assessment, Compliance Manager is going to go through and just give you some suggestions for what you can do, even if you don't know what regulation you need to meet yet, if you just need to perform some generic protections for your environment. And it'll tell you right here, here are some suggestions you can make. Here are some of the things that affect what your overall compliance score is. And it gives you the details for what that compliance score breakdown actually means. What do all of those numbers that result in this overall percentage actually translate to? So right here on the Overview tab, you have a lot of ways to just start getting the information to make decisions with. But we are here to talk about HIPAA and HITECH. So let's have a look at some of the information contained in this HIPAA assessment. Now, we provide two different ways to do this. One is a universal and one is specific to 365. So if you have to use third-party templates or third-party tools, at the end of the day, we are vendor agnostic and we want your data to be safe. So if you need to use things that aren't Microsoft, that's fine. Our universal template is designed to be adapted to that. And if you've already deployed a lot of your Microsoft tools and you want to use those to start meeting your HIPAA compliance, we have more prescribed guidance for those right here. So if you wanted to click on this before you actually turn this into an assessment, you can see what it contains, what kinds of instructions, the control families, and the guidance within those control families right here. And turning this into an assessment that will actually look at your environment, see what's in place, see what you need to do, and start giving you the ability to assign those, that's easy. You just click on this Create Assessment button here. You can give it a name. And you can choose if you need to add this to a new group. For example, if you have other compliance regulations you're meeting and they're all going to be under one healthcare related group, you can do that. Or you can use something you've already got in place. Now, I've actually already created an assessment for this. So let's go see what it looks like when you go from a template into the actual assessment here. This is where you can see it actually break down what's in place already in your organization. And you can see some of your improvement actions right here. And it'll break them down by what's failed, what's already passed, and it gives you your top recommendations. You can actually narrow this down further by looking at your control families, where it breaks down all the requirements for HIPAA, everything from administrative safeguards, which control things like access control, admin accounts, to technical safeguards here. And the technical safeguards contain things like encryption, which is usually what people think of first when they think of HIPAA compliance, as well as turning things on like audit controls. So let's take a look at something like encryption here. We want to see what we can do about setting this up, which is part of HIPAA. And we have all these individual actions under this control family. How do we start setting this up? How do we start implementing these? Well, let's click on something like DLP right here. This will give you instructions right here for how to implement this. So if you're not quite sure what to do, you're not quite sure what tools to click on, you don't need to wander around. You don't need to go look up additional documentation somewhere else. It gives you the links to the information you need right here, the prerequisites, and it even gives you this handy Launch Now button. The Launch Now will take you to the specific section of the Compliance Center, or if it's somewhere in the Security Center, it'll link to Defender or to Sentinel, to whatever the relevant portal is for you to start implementing the control. So if we click on Launch Now, you can see it'll automatically take us to the data loss prevention. And we can have it right here where we can start following the instructions for how to use something like this. And it instructs us to use the default DLP policy for HIPAA, which we actually have a template for that in here. And I can just show you that real quick right here. And if you wanted to, you can go through this step by step according to the steps that are right here in the Compliance Manager and set that up, and it'll tell you how to put it in test mode or how to start using it to protect your data and what it protects. You can also edit the implementation details. So if you need to track this as a project, here you can say, okay, we are planning this, or we need to put a different implementation in place for it. We can track it with the date and the notes. And all of this information is recorded and retained. So you can print this out if you need to show defensibility to it, if you get audited during a regulation, for example. And let's say you don't have an especially large team, so you need to assign this to somebody else on your admin team. Your compliance team may only be a couple of people and they can't do it all by themselves. You can assign these tasks individually to your employees. And once you do that, they will receive an email that looks just like this. And they get the details of it, and they can actually click right here in that email, and it'll tell them exactly what they're in charge of now. And if you wanted to give them the permissions, they can come in here and they can edit the details themselves. When did they start working on it? What stage is this particular control in? Are there any problems with it? Anything like that. Now, in addition to doing something like that, we also run testing for some of these controls in the background for you. We will periodically go through and check these controls. So DLP, for example, or turning on multi-factor authentication. And if something slips out of place, you can set up an alert to tell you that, to say, hey, I need to know, for example, when something changes. You can actually set that up right here in the alert policy. So you don't have to remember to come in here and check. You don't need to tell your compliance team periodically log in here once a week, see if anything has changed, and if it has, fix it. You can set up your own policy to say, hey, get an email whenever something happens, whenever there's an improvement or a change in my compliance score, I want the details for it. And those details will look a bit like this. I had an alert there. This is what the policy would look like here. And so you can get that to say, hey, get me an email, send me a message so I can come in here and look at it. And as I said, we will periodically check these. We'll test them. I believe it's once every 24 hours. If something changes, you can be told. Now, in addition to that, we also keep these assessments up to date for you. So as changes to the regulations happen, which if you've ever worked with HIPAA, CGIS, any of these regulations, you know they happen pretty frequently. Microsoft keeps them updated in the background. So you don't have to come in here and update anything or tell it to periodically look. We will put those changes in place for you. If it results in a change required by some of your settings, we don't make those changes, but we will tell you what needs to be done. So you can come in and you can assess the requirement for yourself, and you can plan out how to implement it on your own. So we try to strike that balance between giving you the information and then giving you the flexibility to put it in place when you need. Right, now those are the assessments for just DLP. I know we just looked at that one briefly. This does give you the guidance for things that aren't necessarily technical as well. So turning on things like audit logging, this can say, hey, here's what you might need to do. Here's what you should use it for. And the audit logging becomes especially important for HIPAA because you have the breach notification rule that commonly comes up when you're thinking about EPHI. Audit logging provides defensibility when you have to show whether or not an account that was compromised gained access to EPHI or whether or not it was disclosed. You can prove with the audit logging, and especially with premium audit, that no access was obtained. And that can save an organization from having to spend money to remediate it afterwards. For example, if, as Steve mentioned earlier, you can catch up to $50,000 fines for some of these breaches. Setting up audit logging and going about it in the compliance manager's instructions means you can say, hey, yes, an account was compromised, but we can prove with traceable, defensible logs that no access was gained. They didn't get an email, they didn't get into anybody's documents, so you can prove you don't need to spend the money to remediate it. Now, in addition to the trials that I mentioned earlier, if you are an E5 or G5 customer, whether Office or Microsoft 365, you actually have access to 3 of these templates to use as an assessment for free at any time. So if you're not using Compliance Manager right now and you are an E5 or a G5 license holder, you can come in here. You can grab HIPAA and turn it into an assessment, and you can have it look at your environment today. The Compliance Manager doesn't make changes to your environment for you. So when it goes through and evaluates things, your employees don't get emails. It's not going to change any of your security or control settings. It's just going to give you that visibility that you need. So I would recommend doing so. And if you are going to have to find information about what Microsoft controls, you can click on that right here. And you can see the HIPAA compliance requirements that Microsoft manages. Being a cloud provider, we do adhere to a shared responsibility model. So some of this is on us, and you can see exactly what that is right here. In addition to these controls, you can see the related controls with them. So if you need to move back and forth between them, you can do so very easily. And if you are implementing these controls yourself, you can upload things in the evidence portal right here. So this way you can keep all of your documentation, all of your testing results and progress, all of the implementation progress, all of it can be kept in one place, in one assessment. So no one has to go look through emails for the last 6 months. No one's got to go try and dig out some document in some file share they forgot they had. It's all in one place. You can provide access as needed to a compliance regulator, to your internal admin teams, to somebody who needs to make edits to notes, and you can assign tasks to people as needed. Now, with that, I do want to turn this over to Ashok. He will be the one presenting for us regarding HITECH and Defender for Cloud Apps.
Thank you, Rich.
Not a problem.
Thank you, Rich, and appreciate it. And you gave me a platform, perfect platform to talk about Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which would help customers to meet the compliance requirement beyond their M365 infrastructure or workload. Now, Defender for Cloud is a cloud native application protection platform, which has this feature called Cloud Security Posture Management. And using Cloud Security Posture Management, customers can assess their infrastructure and workload based on HIPAA and HITECH controls. Now, we know organizations are moving to cloud and they have workloads and infrastructure implemented there. And I was reading one of the article from Forbes, and they mentioned even today, 40% of organizations, they are struggling to meet their compliance requirement in the cloud, but not anymore. Microsoft Defender can help on that aspect. And at Microsoft, as we talk about blending different tools, like that's how I'm going to show how Defender for Cloud can help to maintain those security posture. And I'm going to talk about compliance assessment template in the next slide. Rich, can you move to the next slide, please? Defender for Cloud can help assess customers' environment on multiple regulatory standards, which are already available in the portal. Microsoft Security Benchmark is something that which is already added and comes by default. However, should you need any other templates or assessment capabilities, that can be always enabled using a specific Defender plan. Based on my experience working with state and local government, some of the compliance my customers are looking for are NIST, ISO, CIS or FedRAMP. However, HIPAA and HITECH is one of the controls that state and local government is looking for as well. And using Defender for Cloud, it will help you to assess your environment specific to your workload, your infrastructure, your resources, and it will help you to monitor continually your environment, as well as you can take a specific action on that. And when we are talking about simplifying compliance, compliance is pretty hard. And I'm going to show in my demo environment from Defender for Cloud how that can be achieved. Okay, so I'm going to show my demo environment. As you see on the screen, this is a Microsoft demo environment that we are using, and Contoso Hotel is an imaginary company that trying to meet regulatory compliance. And in the dashboard, you see Microsoft is providing all the different regulatory compliance standards that can be leveraged to make sure you meet your regulatory compliance requirement. Based on my experience when I was working with an audit and accounting firm, I was working on multiple assessment on customers' environment. And one of the most challenging thing about compliance is how do you meet those control requirement at scale over time. And control mapping is another very difficult thing, because HIPAA, HITECH, all those kind of controls that needs to be mapped to your environment just to make sure it is very specific for your environment, for your workload. And Microsoft Defender for Cloud has different framework that would help you to achieve. In this view, this is a very neat and clean view where it shows all the different controls framework that I am trying to achieve in my environment. And as you see, it gives you a numeric assessment, how many controls, what's passed, what failed, and you can take specific action on them. Basically, I've seen organizations, they maintain their controls in big fat Excel workbook, and during the audit time, they try to validate those controls based on their environment, which is a extremely tedious process and extremely challenging as well. So for that, you need some automation from the platform, and Defender for Cloud has that capability which continuously assess your environment, and it can give you dynamic results on the portal that can be downloadable. As you see, there is an option to download report, which would give you something like this, where you can share this report with the auditors. I have downloaded this report, which has all the details about how many controls are in there. This is kind of a very good executive summary with control number and control failures and whatnot. And as I'm talking about different control, it's important that HIPAA and HITRUST has different control domains. And how do you map to controls and how it's happening in your environment? Behind the scene, what's happening? Microsoft is creating Azure policies, which are surveys that make sure you are like creating additional details from the environment, what's happening based on the policies. And that's how Microsoft is mapping. Now, you see there are different control domains, and we try to make sure what we are doing. And if I try to click on more details about configuration management, it gives additional details. Compliance is a shared responsibility. Microsoft is securing the cloud for you. However, there are specific controls that you need to make sure you are meeting. On this particular dashboard, you see Microsoft articulates what are the controls Microsoft is meeting from the framework perspective, and it gives you good result. However, it's clearly articulating what are the controls that you need to work on your side, and you need to take a notice on the action and action type. As you see, these are manual controls. That means these are the controls that customer has to work on their own and make sure they take care. Like for example, develop access control policies and procedure. This is not something coming from the platform, but this is basically underscoring the fact the customer has to work on that. However, I will go into some of the technical controls where you would see how Microsoft is meeting on those controls. Example, information protection program. This is one of the key area for HIPAA and HITRUST. And if I try to go more details about the control, it will tell you what are the actions that you need to take. As you see, this is an automated control. That means from the platform, you are getting the capability where Microsoft is assessing your workload, your resources based on this particular security policy that created. And it's a technical control, and you get all the granular details about the control and how many failed resources and what are the action you need to take. As you see the level of details which Microsoft is providing just to make sure you are meeting your compliance requirement. And there is one more control I would like to talk about is endpoint protection. And on that also, you have the level of details where it tells you what customer needs to do versus what are the things it's provided by the platform. Now, you might ask me, how do I enable this control in the environment, right? So to have the capability of regulatory compliance dashboard, you need Azure subscription and you need to turn on a specific Defender plan. And for that, you need to go to manage compliance policies where you have your Azure subscription, and you need to go to your Azure subscription to see what are the capabilities that is already available. Defender for cloud security posture management is a free feature right now, but specific features are in public preview, and there might be additional like cost associated to it. But this is right now public preview, and definitely I would recommend customers to go ahead and use it. And as you see here, regulatory compliance and industry best practices are part of it. So you need to enable your different Defender plan just to make sure you are using it. And again, I was talking about everything is happening behind the scene is using Azure policies. So let me give you an walkthrough about those security for policies and how you can enable that. Microsoft Security Benchmark is enabled by default and it's auditing your environment. However, there are out of box a lot of compliance frameworks that can be added. So today we are talking about HIPAA and HITRUST. As you see, there are a lot of controls in my environment that's been added already. And here is HIPAA and HITRUST. And on this particular initiative, you can see that there are a lot of automated controls are added that is actually assessing an environment continuously once enabled. However, there are some of the manual controls also that is also being validated, and you can make sure that you are meeting those controls while you are trying to achieve your compliance posture. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is one of the feature called compliance over time workbook. As I'm talking, compliance is something very challenging, and it's hard to meet over time. There was one of the CISO's comment who mentioned compliance is like you're drinking your morning coffee. You have to do every day, every time. So you have this compliance over time workbook, which would help you to monitor your trend on your compliance. So as I was telling, you need to have a specific log analytics workspace, and you need to choose the subscription that you are using, and you have all the details about all the standards which is already added to your environment. I'm going to choose HIPAA and HITECH here, and it will give you a very nice, neat dashboard how I am trending on my compliance. As you see on the screen, I'm not doing good job on my HIPAA and HITECH control because there are not many controls passed, and I've been not doing since like last October or something. But as you see the detail and the level of granularity on this report, I would like to point this is public preview, so please expect there might be some additional addition of the features or changes to this dashboard, but you can always get started to use it. And it's basically assessing on kind of main controls, and you can know how your environment is trending on that. The next thing I would like to talk about, whenever there is any control assessment, like auditors or your central cybersecurity team would like to audit your environment or provide a report or dashboard, there is always some action associated to it. Like how do you take action on the control failure? As you see on the screen, Microsoft has this capability called quick fix. With quick fix, you can meet this control and you can remediate this particular control. However, for a more detailed report, you can go to the recommendations and you can see how you can identify specific control which are affecting your secure score. So here I'm going to choose the initiative, and then out of all the compliance control items that I have, I'm going to choose HIPAA and HITECH, and it'll tell me the controls which are recommended from Microsoft. However, it's impacting your HIPAA score. With that, you would be able to identify those specific report and result, and you can take action on that. I have another view where I have captured all the recommendations, and I have filtered with HIPAA HITECH for my Azure environment, and I can quickly go through and tell myself, okay, where do I need to spend time? How do I need to prioritize my remediation action so that I meet and I am basically compliant with HIPAA compliance? And with the inside, you see there are some controls which can be used remediate using quick fix, or there might be some areas where I need additional work to do. As you see, end-to-end, Microsoft Defender for Cloud is helping you to continuously monitor your environment based on a specific compliance program, assess your environment, as well as giving you this executive report just to make sure that is shareable as evidence to the auditors or to your leadership. Not only that, it can help you to remediate some of the control failures. With this, it's kind of help you to over time achieve your compliance posture. With this, I would like to invite Rahul to take over to the next session. Rahul, over to you, please. Take it over.
Hey, thank you, Ashok. Hi, everyone. My name is Rahul Wonderverdi. I'm a managing director here at Agile. I've been with Agile off and on for about 8 years. I say that because I took a break and actually worked with some of these fine people who are on the call today as part of the Microsoft team. So here today, I want to share with you how we've used what Microsoft has presented in practice in the real world with one of our healthcare clients. So give me just a moment here while I pull up my presentation. Okay. And one of the things I want to start with is, I want to say last year, but I know we're in 2023, but the summer of 2021, there was a cybersecurity newsletter published by the OCR. And for those of you who are not familiar with the OCR is the Office of Civil Rights. They're the entity that enforces HIPAA compliance to other organizations, right? And what they had published was controlling access to ePHI. And, for just to save some time, they went through and, basically published the number of data breaches that were found, where 61% were external, 39% were internal, right? And what came out of that was the breach notification rule that applies to unsecured PHI data. Now, one of the things that's near and dear to me is that, Richard earlier went over the Compliance Manager solution, which is such a great tool. It's such a hidden nugget that Microsoft has that all of our customers should be using, right? It provides a plethora of controls and regulated controls that you should be complying with based on whatever template you want to align yourself with, right? Whether it's HIPAA, NIST, CIS, so on and so forth. For us, what we did here from a HIPAA standpoint was we focused on ePHI. So with ePHI and that specific control, there were 4 specific parts that were pulled from the Compliance Manager portal that said, here are the areas you need to comply with, and here's how you get to that. And for that specific control there, it's understanding who the unique identity is, whether there's an emergency way to access the data, and automation, as well as encryption and decryption. In this use case, with our healthcare client, we had someone requesting data from the data analytics team. Generally, this data is stored in a structured data location, which already has specific controls of who can access what and do with what data and massage it however they need to. The moment they request a specific data from a separate entity, whether it's internal or external purposes, that data then comes into generally a standard Excel data spreadsheet, right? Once it's in an Excel spreadsheet, that data becomes unstructured, and in most cases, that data contains PII or PHI data. What happens is once that data is then delivered to that internal or external party, that data is now unprotected, right? Sure, sometimes they throw up a share that only that person has access to, but the moment they have access to the data and they're able to download it, that protection is null and void, and they can do whatever they need to do with that data in order to essentially do their job. But sometimes accidental spillage happens, right? So here's a flow of the current state. The current state is the requester initiates by email, ticket, or phone request for some data, right? For whatever they need for work. The report administrator generates this report from the electronic data warehouse. The report is then provided via email or a file share. The requester then takes that data and is able to leverage to use that data and work with that data through any forms of media, right? Whether it be a thumb drive, another email, their own phone, personal phone, or maybe even another shared drive within the organization that should not be shared with. What we did with that is we enforced specific controls that essentially provided not only the encryption of that data, the unique identity of who has access to that data, the automation workflow of when they can access that data and then remove the access, but also the prevention of the data being shared to external media devices. So you'll see here once we get to about step 3, the report is provided to Microsoft's OneDrive and Teams solution. It scans the content is detected as PHI and then protects the data accordingly. So that way, when the user gains access to the data, they are only able to use that data for themselves and they cannot share it externally or internally, right? So here's an example of how Microsoft's overall Purview solution is able to protect and meet a compliance control that's then tied to a HIPAA regulatory compliance control. And once the solution is in place, then that control is then met, and then the organization is now in compliance with HIPAA, right? So when an OCR comes in, does an audit, they can see all through Microsoft's Compliance Manager that all these controls are in place, no fine is involved. Now, what's important when we talk about the enforcement, right, of OCR, there was a $50,000 fine here and there, but the bigger picture, right, that we call the sleeping giant is understanding what sensitive data is in your environment and what that amount of risk calculates out to be. The first, the first fine could be 50,000, but when you take a look at the overall data that's living on your infrastructure, whether it's on-prem or cloud, and that data is not being protected, that data can accumulate to what you see here, up to $8.7 billion in potential risk. The data that we scanned at this client roughly had 865 million of confirmed risk, right? So if that, then that's just a sliver of the data that we were able to scan. So if that tells you anything, what the number, the large amount of data that's sitting on premise or that's sitting in a cloud that's currently unprotected, and you have these tools of you have Purview Information Protection and then Purview Compliance Manager working together to help you stay in compliance. This is going to help reduce potential fines in the future for the organization. Now, one of the things that we like to talk about, especially when it comes to information protection and governance of your data, is it's a crawl, walk, run method, right? The crawling is when you're going through and you're doing the entire discovery end to end of your data, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. After that, you're classifying the data, and then finally you're protecting the data and then governing that data, right? So overall, once you're able to then protect the data, you're going to start looking at archiving, data retention and deletion, records management, and then adding disposition reviews to make a determination if that data should still exist or not, right? And then lastly, auditing that data, where it goes, who has access to it, what's being done with it, so that way you're not only securing your environment and improving your overall security posture, but you're also in compliance with HIPAA and HITRUST. So how do we do that today? One of the things I want to share with you is our delivery methodology of how we get there, how we've had other customers get there, right? What's very important, especially as it relates to compliance, is a top-down business alignment with the bottom-up risk maturity analysis. While having the technical security teams involved is helpful, having the business aligned to support the overall program is key in order to make sure that the security controls that are being put in place are aligned and not negatively impacting the business from doing its job, right? Its overall service. Once you develop the strategy, right, then we put in the program in place. So we illustrate what the future state should look like for your organization, and then what that journey looks like, whether it's in phases or waves, right? Then we go through an implementation phase where we break that up into waves and making sure that it aligns with any kind of regulations or compliance standards. We help with adoption, because that's also huge, especially when you start introducing new controls into the environment that could impede, a business analyst or a data analytics person, or even a frontline worker like a nurse, right? What that adoption looks like and what that's how they're going to adjust to the new solution that's not necessarily preventing them from doing their job, but enhancing their overall experience of using the solution, as well as elevating your overall compliance and security posture. Lastly, we keep track of key performance indicators of that adoption, as well as how that solution has helped reduce your overall risk over time. Once we remediate the high-risk data, we then flip to an operations mode, right? This is where you're currently refining the detection methodology that's being used within Microsoft solution. Screening, you still looking at high risk and then going down the levels of medium to low, or maybe you have high, medium, low, and then low, and then reporting the findings up to your board or your executive management. And with that, I'll turn this back over to Microsoft with some closing thoughts.
Thank you very much. We are also answering additional questions in the chat. Thank you very much, Raul, and the folks at Agile for being a awesome and valued partner here at Microsoft. And again, thank to our moderator, Tony Lanzapame, and our additional presenters with myself, Richard Beserra and Ashok Ghosh. And there have been some great questions in the chat that have also got some responses with some additional links to some additional information related to the overall service descriptions discussed here and the specific templates and components that have been discussed here. Also, we would at the same time encourage you to visit the technical documentation that's available, and I will share my screen and show you the links as well. At our technical documentation for Microsoft Priva is at aka.ms/Priva docs. And of course, you can start a free 90-day trial at aka.ms/try Priva. And the product landing page, if you want to know more information about the nearly 20 different Microsoft Purview products that are available, the product landing page at aka.ms/Priva/web. And with that, we will go ahead and adjourn and give you folks some additional time back. The recording will also be made available as well. And we will also have this recording available on our channel on YouTube as well. And we'll paste a link to that.